Good evening. So the sun's not quite down, but Chad said this lighting would be okay. Sometime back, he had one of those questions that he's asking so that we could do more content. And so I thought I would answer this one I've been thinking about for a while. It is to come up with a personal Mount Rushmore. Like, what four people would you choose to commemorate on this side of a mountain like Mount Rushmore? And I picked four people, two men, two women, different backgrounds. They're all, I believe, historically influential people, just from my lifetime though. I've not met them individually, but I've witnessed them in person giving speeches, and they were inspirational. So I thought I would share these four individuals. They cover a range of backgrounds, and I think they're pretty well known. The first one is Corrie ten Boom. She was a concentration camp survivor, and I say that instead of Holocaust survivor because she was not Jewish. Her family was Dutch and helped hide the Jews until they were arrested. She was born in the Netherlands in 1892 and died in California, so she lived in my state until 1983. And she came to speak at my church when I was very young. I mean, when she died, I was only, 12. So I had no idea who she was. I just knew there was some lady that came to speak sometime, and I didn't know the impact that she would make until I finally read her more famous book, The Hiding Place. And that's very recent that I finally read that. I'll never forget the concept, this one in particular, that we are to be thankful for every single thing. And the picture I get in mind from that book was about fleas. And she and her sister, it was like, I'm to be thankful for fleas? Like, really? Yes. If it weren't for all the fleas in the women's barracks at that concentration camp, the guards wouldn't have avoided it. I mean, they hated the fleas, so the guards wouldn't walk near their barracks very often, and that allowed the women to meet and have Bible study and prayer. And I think, at least emotionally, kept them alive, and of course Corrie made it out. No matter what troubles I have, I can be confident that God is still sovereign, and there may be a good reason for some of the struggles that I might feel are unnecessary from my own point of view. I mean, you would never think that there to be a positive to having like fleas. That's just gross. But it makes sense when she put it that way. The guards were avoiding them, and she had smuggled in her Bible, a tiny one, and God made a way for them to meet and pray with him. I thought that was cool. Okay, so number 2 is Billy Graham. Yes, another spiritual one. My family went to one of his big rallies, and I couldn't tell you when or where. I just remember being there and the way it felt to hear him speak, and that so many people went forward at the end to accept forgiveness. I'm thinking they had never heard the good news presented the way he did. Billy Graham was so caring and genuine, and it's as though every word were spoken by the Holy Spirit through him. He was that in tune with the Lord. So the first two are on the spiritual side. And so I know I want to cover a range of backgrounds, but I said with this present age being just a wisp of air compared to eternity, I don't find it odd at all that at least half of my personal Mount Rushmore would be spiritually minded. But we can move on to the art world, literature. Number 3 is Maya Angelou. She gave the most beautiful benediction at UOP, the University of Pacific, when my friend graduated in library science in the 90s. And my friend was thrilled. I mean, Maya Angelou was one of her biggest heroes, So it was a thrill to see her speak in person. And you might be familiar with her autobiography called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That's still on my list to read. She represents to me so many things about American civil rights and activism, and also the beauty of literature and poetry. And you know, she passed in 2014, or we would still be reading her newest works. She had a lot to say and did so beautifully. Number 4, the very last, I chose Ronald Reagan. I only say it that way because it sounds cliche, like, oh, you know, duh. My family went to one of his California rallies in 1980, just before he won the presidency. And he had been the governor of California, where we live, until 1975. So I believe Reaganomics, as they call it, did change the United States for the better, and I would love to see some of his ideas come roaring back. He is quoted all the time, and for good reason. Here's some of my favorites. He said, "Government's first duty is to protect the people, not run their lives." Yes, and all too often government runs our lives. I detest that. The other thing he said that I like, government does not solve problems, it subsidizes them. Yeah, government is the problem. And this one was used on the campaign trail in 1980. It said, he said this in New Jersey, so it's very likely that he said it at the same rally that I was at that time. He said, "A recession is when a neighbor loses his job. A depression is when you lose yours. And recovery is when Jimmy Carter loses his." To great laughter, I'm sure. Lastly, commenting on another of my passions, Reagan said, "I've noticed that everybody that's for abortion has already been born." You know, that's poignant. So anyway, I wanted to thank Yardism, Chad, for coming up with this question. It gave me a chance to dig a little bit and come up with some, I think, quality content. I mean, whatever, if you think. He says I'm a little better off the cuff, but scripted, it is what it is. So thanks for watching, and if you want to leave a comment, super. Have a good evening.